Have you ever had, like, a Cassandra moment?
Oh, yeah. Classic mythological curse.
Right. And you sitting there listening, you probably know the exact feeling I'm talking about. It's that incredibly specific, deeply isolating experience where you can just see the writing on the wall.
Clear as day.
Exactly. You're sitting in, I don't know, a Tuesday morning meeting looking at the macroeconomic trends of your industry. Or maybe you're just staring at a new internal software rollout.
And you realize, absolute clarity, that a structural collapse is basically imminent.
So you do the responsible thing, right? You speak up, you point to the data, you warn everybody.
And your reward for that foresight is, well, you're completely ignored.
Or worse, you're actively ostracized. People call you cynical. They tell you that you aren't being a team player, and you're effectively shoved to the margins of your own community.
Which is agonizing, because then you just have to sit there quietly for years.
Yeah, watching the disaster unfold in slow motion. And then comes the ultimate insult.
The disaster happens exactly as you predict.
Right. The market correct. And the very same people who knocked you suddenly pivot. They adopt your exact strategy, and the whole industry throws them a parade for being, like, visionary geniuses.
It really is the defining workplace tragedy of our era. I mean, Cassandra, in the Greek myth, was given the gift of absolute prophecy, but cursed by Apollo to never, ever.
Which is just brutal.
It is. And when you are sitting in that position, the frustration isn't really about your ego. It's not just wanting people to say, you know, oh, you were right.
No, it's about the absolute systemic lack of validation. The terrifying isolation of seeing a house burning down while everyone inside insists they're just enjoying a nice warm fireplace.
That exact feeling, that white-hot, entirely justified fury, is basically the engine driving our deep dive.
It really is. Because today, we are unpacking a piece of source material that is, on its surface, a very raw, very angry piece of internet commentary.
Very angry.
We're looking at a video from a creator named Geeky Sparkles on the YouTube channel Clownfish TV. And just to set the table here, the video is literally titled, F you. Clownfish TV was right about the animation industry.
She is practically vibrating with years of pent-up frustration.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing. If you can look past the expletives and the raw emotion, what you actually find is an incredibly dense, factually rigorous post-mortem on the current state of the animation business.
Which is a very turbulent business right now. And that's our mission today. We're going to extract the hard business mechanics buried inside this.
Right, because what Clownfish TV is describing isn't just internet drama.
No, not at all. It's not just fandom infighting. It is a real-time macroeconomic autopsy of the traditional studio animation model.
We are going to explore the collapse of the ad-based revenue models and really get into the brutal, unglamorous reality of independent studio logistics.
And the harsh truth that the entire future of this art form might hinge almost entirely on, well, supply chain economics and physical merch.
It's wild to think about. But to understand how we got to a place where creators are screaming at their webcam pure vindication, we have to start with the catalyst.
Right, the inciting incident.
Exactly. We need to look at a recent massive career pivot by a guy named Matt Braley. Now, if you follow animation, you likely know Braley's resume. He's an absolute industry heavyweight.
Oh, for sure. We're talking storyboard artist and director on Gravity Falls.
He was a writer for Steven Universe, and of course the creator and showrunner of the massive Disney hit Amphibia.
So he is fully entrenched in the studio system. He's 37 years old. He has massive industry clout.
He's exactly the kind of talent the traditional pipeline is designed to retain and reward.
Right. He represents the absolute pinnacle of what a creative professional in Hollywood is supposed to achieve. He navigated the corporate gauntlet, delivered massive returns, and built a dedicated audience.
Which is vital context, because it makes his next move so disruptive. Following its success in television, Braley quite naturally attempted to pivot into feature.
It's the standard trajectory.
Right. So in 2023, he took a feature project to Sony. And this pitch was entirely different from his previous work. It was semi-autobiographical.
And deeply, deeply personal. Braley lives with a condition called short bowel syndrome.
Yeah. And he wanted to take that physical reality, the reality of having a fragile body, of navigating the world with medical constraint, and translate it into a fantasy narrative for kids.
The pitch centered on a sick child who is dealing with this specific condition, right? A kid navigating a life that looks fundamentally different.
And then this kid encounters these Thai spirit. The core thematic goal was to show kids with fragile bodies that they can still grapple with terrifying challenges and have incredible sprawling adventures.
It's an incredibly potent premise. It's the kind of storytelling that has the potential to be generational, honestly.
Culturally specific, but universally relatable.
Exactly. He is taking a highly specific cultural touchstone like Thai mythology and pairing it with a really rare, vulnerable...
So, according to Braley, the executives at Sony were actually very receptive in the room. They weren't combative. They acknowledged that the concept art was breathtaking.
But ultimately, when the spreadsheets were tallied, the studio passed.
They passed. And the rationale behind the rejection is where the structural rot of the industry really starts to show.
They started nitpicking the superficial elements, right?
Yeah, like the logo design or the temp music he used. But the foundational roadblock was the premise itself, a movie about a sick kid and Thai spirits.
The studio looked at their risk assessment models and just deemed it too neat.
Too niche. They decided it simply wasn't commercially viable. You can almost see the executives trying to map this film onto a 4-quadrant marketing grid, right?
And realizing it doesn't fit neatly into the talking animal box.
Or the established superhero IP box, so they instantly pull the plug.
This is a perfect distillation of the friction between personal storytelling and corporate risk aversion. We have to look at the financial realities of theatrical animation rates.
It's terrifying.
It is. A major studio animated feature isn't just a creative endeavor anymore. It is a massive capital outlay.
You were looking at production budgets north of $70 to $100 million. Easy.
And then an equivalent amount spent on marketing. So when a studio like Sony hears short bowel syndrome and Thai spirit, their algorithmic forecasting models basically short circuit.
They don't see a universal human story. They see a $150 million bet with no historical comparables.
Exactly. But Clownfish TV actually makes a brilliant counter-argument to this executive mindset by pointing to another Netflix's K-pop Demon Hunters.
Oh, yes. I love this point. She points out that Sony passed on Braley's pitch before K-pop Demon Hunters came out and proved that a highly specific, culturally rooted concept could absolutely smash viewership numbers.
Now, obviously, a K-pop theme inherently has a larger built-in mass appeal, right?
Sure, K-pop is a massive global export, but the broader point she is making is about the complete failure of these massive studios to bet on new cultural ideas.
Sony lacked the predictive foresight to see that modern audiences are actually starved for specific...
They just want the safe, sanitized templates that worked 5 years ago.
It really exposes how studios define the word niche. In the modern executive suite, niche is simply shorthand for we don't have historical data on this.
Right. It hasn't made $1 billion yet, so it's niche.
Exactly. But the success of projects like K-pop Demon Hunters or even heavily stylized films like Spider-Verse proves that audiences will ravenously consume unfamiliar concept if the execution is top.
So Sony's failure to back Braley's vision isn't just a creative disagreement. It highlights an industry-wide inability to predict cultural trends.
The massive overhead of these studios forces them to be entirely reactive. They can only invest in what has already been proven by someone else taking the initial risk.
Wait, let me stop you right there. Because this is the exact opposite of what the industry has been telling us for decades.
How so?
Well, weren't streaming platforms and modern tech-forward studios supposed to be the saviors of niche storytelling?
The golden age pitch.
Right, the pitch was always, the internet has infinite shelf space, so we don't need to make one show for everybody. We can make 1,000 shows for 1,000 specific audience.
That was the prompt.
It feels like pitching a deeply personal Michelin star fusion dish to a restaurant chain that only wants to sell fast food burgers.
That's a great way to put it.
You bring them this incredible, nuanced plate of food, and the executives look at it and say, wow, this is gorgeous, but we can't figure out how to put this in a drive-through paper bag, so we're going to pass.
Yeah.
Why did the infinite shelf space suddenly turn back into a drive-through window?
Because the macroeconomic climate completely inverted. You're entirely right about the initial pitch of the streaming era, but that pitch was subsidized by an era of zero interest rate policy.
ZRRP.
Exactly, ZRRP. Borrowing money was essentially free. The platforms were fighting a land grab for subscriber growth at absolutely any cost.
Wall Street rewarded them purely on subscriber acquisition, not on actual profit.
So they threw billions of dollars at incredibly niche, risky, creator-driven projects just to capture every possible demographic.
But over the last 2 to 3 years, the cost of capital skyrocketed.
And Wall Street abruptly changed the mandate. It went from growth at all costs to show us the free cash flow immediately.
So in a climate of forced immediate profitability, the tolerance for risk evaporates overnight.
The infinite shelf space doesn't matter if the production pipeline still costs $100 million per swing. They retreated to the safety of established IP because they literally could not afford.
Which leaves a creator like Matt Braley standing at a massive existential fork in the road.
He had a really tough choice.
After the Sony project stalled out, he essentially had 2 options. Option A, go crawling back into the massive studio machinery, spend another 3 years developing some sanitized IP, and risk having the executives shelve it for a tax write-off anyway.
Or option B.
Right, strike out completely on his own, launch an independent studio, and take his destiny into his own hands. And Braley chose option.
He announced he was going indie.
And that announcement is exactly what triggered this nuclear explosion of I told you so from Clownfish TV.
Because for Geeky Sparkles, Brelly's pivot is not just some inspiring story of an auteur finding his wing.
No. It is the exact specific structural strategy she had been aggressively, publicly advocating for years.
To the point of being systematically ostracized by the very animation community that is now throwing flowers at Briley.
This is where we really need to dive into the psychology of the Cassandra complex and the terrifying power of professional echo chambers.
It's fast.
Let's get into the weeds on this because the anger in her voice is so earned. For a solid 2 to 3 years, Clownfish TV had been standing out in the cold, screaming through a megaphone about the macroeconomic realities of the industry.
They were looking at the contraction of the streaming budgets.
They were tracking the aggressive outsourcing of animation pipelines to cheaper overseas studios.
And they were telling the workforce, the traditional studio system is collapsing, the jobs are not coming back.
You need to gather your experienced friends, pool your resources, build an independent studio structure, and start cultivating a direct financial relationship with an audience.
Which, if we look at the data objectively, was the only sound business advice available in a rapidly contracting market.
It makes perfect sense.
It's the exact transition we witnessed in the independent video game sector a decade ago. When middle-tier publishers collapsed, the developers who survived were the ones who formed indie studios and went directly to Steam or Kickstarter.
But the reaction Clownfish TV received from the Animation Guild and the hardcore fandom wasn't gratitude.
Not at all. It was violent, coordinated hostility.
They were labeled as grifters. They were accused of being insidious, of actively cheering for animators to lose their jobs.
They faced massive, sustained slander campaigns across industry subreddits and social media platforms.
It wasn't just casual disagreement. It was a vicious policing of the community border. There's a genuinely chilling anecdote in the source material about a manager who worked on the classic Cartoon Network show, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy.
A seasoned industry veteran.
Right. He simply commented on a post, casually agreeing with Clownfish TV's economic assessment that independent models were the future.
And the resulting harassment from his own peers and the fandom was so intense, he was forced to delete his post.
You aren't even allowed to quietly agree with the pariah.
That is a textbook sociological phenomenon specifically related to labor groups facing existential threats.
That was so.
Well, when a specialized, highly skilled workforce faces a shift that threatens their livelihood and their professional identity, they almost always close ranks.
Because the traditional studio system provided a massive psychological safety net.
Exact. It provided W-2 employment, healthcare, prestige, and a defined career path.
So when an outside commentator points out that the foundation of that entire middle-class existence is mathematically broken,
it triggers a massive defensive response.
Yeah.
The community attacks the messenger because acknowledging the message means accepting a terrifying, unstable reality where their skills might no longer guarantee a paycheck.
And then the punchline line. Matt Braley, the ultimate insider, the industry darling, announces his new independent label, Fantasy Project.
And his press release, his stated business plan. It is practically a verbatim copy of the exact strategy Clownfish TV had been screaming about for years.
He's bypassing the studios, he's gathering a small group of trusted friends, he's focusing on original IP funded directly by the audience.
And the industry's reaction to Braley, universal rapturous applause.
He is hailed as a trailblazer. Even Genny Tartakovsky, an absolute legend, recently came out echoing these exact same independent sentiments.
Everyone is celebrating the exact reality they tried to cancel Clowning out.
Which perfectly explains why Geeky Sparkles is demanding apologies that she knows she will never receive.
What she is experiencing is the brutal, unforgiving reality of timing in market predictions.
Yeah, being early is tough.
There is a famous adage in venture capital, being early is indistinguishable from being wrong.
Wow, that hits hard.
When Clownfish TV made their initial prediction, the pain hadn't fully set in for the mainstream workforce. The studios were still greenlighting just enough projects to keep the alive.
So because they were early, they were treated as if they were maliciously, cynically wrong.
Right. And Matt Braley is making his move right. At the exact moment, the pain is undeniable and the layoffs are widespread. He is perfectly on time. Therefore, he's a vision.
I want to challenge that slightly, or at least look at it from a different angle. Is it possible that the animation community's violent reaction wasn't actually about the timing of the message, but entirely about the nature of the messenger?
It's a fair question.
Look at it like this. It's the difference between your primary care doctor calmly sitting you down and saying, your cholesterol is high, we need to change your diet for your heart health.
Okay.
Versus a hyper-aggressive fitness influencer on YouTube screaming at you that you're poisoning your body and you're going to die.
I see.
When a beloved, proven creator like Braley pivots, it feels to the community like an inspiring artistic evolution. He's one of them, bravely stepping out into the unknown.
Right.
But when an outside cultural commentator, someone whose entire platform is built on critiquing the industry, predicts the collapse of your job market, it feels like an attack. It feels like they were gloating.
That is a highly accurate assessment of the psychological dynamic. In-group versus out-group bias, incredibly powerful, especially in creative.
Because Matt Broly speaks the exact language of the animator.
Exactly. He shares their aesthetic values, their institutional trauma, their creative shorthand. He is a vetted member of the tribe.
And Clownfish TV are perceived inherently as outsiders who profit from the drama.
So the empirical truth of their economic analysis becomes completely irrelevant because the source,
which is deeply fundamentally unfair to Clownfish TV, whose analysis was objectively dead on.
Unfair, yes, but a highly predictable human reaction to structural panic.
Well, we really need to dig into that economic analysis because we keep dancing around the core of this industry collapse.
The money.
Yes, the money. The absolute center of gravity that is forcing everyone out of the studio system and into these independent models comes down to the mechanics of funding.
And specifically, one highly controversial, deeply unglamorous word, merchandise.
Let's get into it. This is where the deep dive transitions from the psychology of fandom into the hard, cold unit economics of production.
The traditional funding mechanism for television animation over the last 40 years has fundamentally...
For decades, the industry relied entirely on a linear ad-based model. A network pays a studio to produce a show, they broadcast it on a Saturday morning, and they sell 30-second ad slots to toy companies.
That model has been completely decimated by cord cut. The linear audience simply does not exist in sufficient numbers to justify the ad rates needed to fund the end.
Right, and you can't just fall back on the old safety nets. Anyone who has studied television history knows about the magic of syndication.
The golden goose?
In the 90s, if you hit the magic number of 100 episodes, your show went into syndication. It would play in reruns forever, and the creators would just collect residual check. It was a license to print money.
That is entirely gone. Streaming platforms operate on a cost-plus model. They buy the show outright for the cost of production plus a small premium and lock it away in their walled garden.
There is no back-end. There is no syndication windfall.
And you'd think, okay, the internet is democratized, put it on YouTube and live off the ad rev.
But the source points out that YouTube's AdSense is a complete mirage for high-budget animation.
Exactly. The CPMs, what advertisers pay per 1,000 views on YouTube, are incredibly volatile.
You cannot build a multi-million-dollar animation pipeline relying on an algorithm that might demonetize your video because a character used a specific word.
Furthermore, as Geeky Sparkles acutely points out, independent creators on YouTube are currently engaged in a brutal trench war for visibility against a massive flood of what she calls AI.
Automated content farms churning out thousands of low-effort videos a day, clogging the recommendation engine.
You cannot fund a team of professional storyboard artists and voice actors on YouTube AdSense alone. The math simply does not.
So the primary broadcast avenue, the syndication avenue, and the digital ad avenue are all collapsing simultaneously. The money simply isn't there to support the traditional studio pipeline.
Which brings us directly to the business model Matt Braley has outlined for his new fantasy project.
And once again, this model is a direct point-by-point validation of Clownfish TV's thesis.
Phase 1 of Braley's plan is direct-to-consumer crowdfunding. He is launching a Kickstarter for an original project called Clara and the...
And we should note the massive leverage he brings to that platform. Even during the pre-launch phase, he already had over 3,000 followers tracking the Kickstarter page.
He is leveraging his pre-existing audience to bypass the corporate gatekeepers entirely. He's going directly to the fans and saying, will you throw in $10?
That's phase 1, proving the demand. But phase 2 is where the actual sustainable business model lies.
And it is where the real controversy within the purist animation nights.
Right, because Braley is explicitly adopting what is called a merchandise-forward model. His stated goal is to build worlds and characters that people love and then fund the production by selling physical merchandise based around them.
He is openly looking at the undeniable independent studio Glit, the team behind the amazing digital...
Or Spindlehorse, who did the early heavy lifting for Hesbin Hotel.
These are studios that completely ignore traditional network greenlights. They fund their animation pipelines through the direct sale of physical products, plush, enamel pin, apparel to a highly dedicated fan.
And this, more than anything else we've discussed, is what has Geeky Sparkles so furiously vindicated.
Oh, she is thrilled about...
Because she's pointing out that this revolutionary new model is actually just a direct return to the most heavily ridiculed era of animation history, the 1980s.
This is perhaps the most fascinating cultural irony of this entire deep dive. For decades, the modern animation community has looked down their noses at 1980s cartoons.
Shows like He-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joe.
The prevailing critique has always been, oh, those weren't real art. They had no soul. They were literally just 30-minute toy.
But Clownfish TV is standing there screaming, yes, exactly, they were toy commercials. Because selling physical objects is the only farmer-proven way to fund the staggering cost of producing high-quality animation.
It's true. Animation is arguably the most labor-intensive storytelling medium ever invented.
I love this point so much because it highlights such a massive, pretentious blind spot in the modern fandom.
There has been this naive belief in artistic purity over the last 20 years. The idea that a show should exist solely for the prestige craft, unburdened by commerce.
But you have to draw or render every single frame. Clownfish TV reveals that a decade ago, they pitched a show to Disney, and they explicitly pitched the supply chain.
They pitched how the show could be merchandised, what the unit economics of the toys would look like.
They understood that the art literally cannot exist without the commerce to subsidize.
And we have a perfect real-world case study of what happens when you completely ignore the commerce side of the equation. We just have to look at the merchandising failure of Matt Braley's own massive hit show, Amphibia.
Yeah, Geeky Sparkles points out a reality that has baffled fans for years. Disney basically never made any official, significant merchandise for Amphibia.
No major toy lines, no widespread apparel pushes, and Braley has stated that this lack of physical representation still haunts him.
But Clownfish TV argues very astutely that this wasn't an oversight. Disney didn't just forget to make the toys.
It was a highly calculated business decision based on data. Disney runs entirely on return on investment, ROI.
If they didn't make Amphibia toys, it was because their internal data analysts realized the audience would not buy physical products in sufficient volumes.
And this brings up a really harsh truth about modern internet fandoms. A show can have a massive, hyper-engaged online audience, the stan.
Right. These fans will generate millions of impressions on Twitter, write fan fiction, aggressively police the show's canon.
But Disney's data clearly shows that this specific type of high-volume social media engagement does not translate into actual point-of-sale purchasing power.
It is the difference between audience engagement and audience monetization. 1 million retweets is a vanity metric. It doesn't pay the lead animator's salary.
Disney saves its massive merchandising machine for guaranteed volume movers like Bluey, Cocomelon, Moana. Those properties move plastic. They convert at the red.
So we have to ask, what does this all mean for the actual art? We demanded pure prestige storytelling in our animation, but relying purely on the craft is a great way to go completely broke.
It's like getting incredibly angry that a local nightclub charges a $20 cover at the door.
Exactly. You might hate the cover charge, you might think it ruins the authentic underground vibe, but without that cover charge, there is literally no money to pay the band.
The band packs up and goes home.
But I have to push back on this model because it feels inherently compromising. Does designing a show specifically with the intent to merchandise it inherently change the soul of the story?
That is the exact existential dread keeping animators awake right now. It undeniably alters the creative process.
Are we doomed to a future where we only get shows about cute, highly marketable mascots?
If you look at the properties that do merchandise heavily, the toys are baked into the fundamental DNA of the character design.
The character designer isn't just asking, does this silhouette communicate emotion?
No, they have to ask, is this silhouette easy to manufacture as a 6-inch plushie without the stitching tearing? Does this prop look good as a keychain?
The logistics of the supply chain begin to dictate the aesthetics of the art.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the absolutely crushing reality of execution. Designing a studio around Kickstarters and plush toys sounds like a very clean, empowering solution on paper.
But the source material transitions heavily into the grueling human cost of actually trying to make this work.
Let's look at Braley's setup. He has explicitly stated that his core team is refusing to take on contract work. They aren't going to keep the lights on by animating commercials for insurance companies.
They're focusing entirely on their own original stories, starting with short-form content to build the audience.
It is an incredibly pure, highly romanticized vision of independent creation.
But Geeky Sparkles immediately steps in to provide a profound reality check. To maintain an independent studio with full-time, fairly compensated workers, you don't just need a successful Kickstarter that raises $100,000.
You need millions of dollars in sustained, predictable revenue. Braley doesn't have venture capitalists dropping bags of cash on his desk.
And Geeky Sparkles knows exactly how punishing that path is because she has walked.
The source details her own grueling experience trying to build an independent IP business with her partner Neon. This was blue-collar, grinding survival.
They were working full-time day jobs just to pay the mortgage. They were raising small children.
And then, after the kids were asleep, they would stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, working on their IP, drawing pages, managing the website.
And then wake up at 7 a.m. to go back to their day job. She emphasizes the sheer, unsustainable physical and mental toll of that lifestyle.
They took almost 0 holidays for a year because when you are the sole engine of your creative enterprise, any time off is lost momentum.
Her commentary completely shatters the Silicon Valley illusion that going indie is simply a matter of opening a Patreon account and watching the money roll in.
For every one massive success story, there are 20 complete failures that quietly burn out.
The indie creator economy is defined by survivorship bias.
Because of that brutal reality, she offers a piece of advice that is surprisingly pragmatic. Do not quit your day job.
Take the big studio money while you still can. Let the corporate Hollywood machinery pay your rent and subsidize your healthcare.
And then build your independent brand on the side. Almost all of your favorite mid-list authors maintain a full-time job.
It is a deeply sobering counter-narrative to the toxic internet ethos of quitting your 9-to-5 to follow your passion.
And we must also acknowledge the massive structural advantage Matt Burley had. He is not a 22-year-old kid fresh out of art school.
He is entering the space armed with high-level industry connections, experienced colleagues, and a built-in global fan base.
He is starting the race halfway to the finish line, and even for him, it is a terrifying financial mountain to climb.
Absolutely.
Let me stop you right there because I want to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
We are talking about this like it's an empowering evolution.
Sure.
But listening to Geeky Sparkle's personal story, it sounds less like a creative awakening and more like a dystopian survival marathon.
It does sound like that.
Are we romanticizing the indie hustle simply because the traditional system is collapsing and we have no other choice? If the only mathematically viable way to make your art is to work a soul-crushing job, raise a family, and then force yourself to animate until 3 a.m., is that actually sustainable?
Or is that just a recipe for total burnout?
Exactly.
That is the tragic paradox of the current. Yes, we are absolutely romanticizing the hustle because it is the only viable lifeboat left.
The traditional studio system provided one crucial, irreplaceable buffer.
It absorbed the financial risk. It provided health insurance, legal departments, and set work.
By shifting the burden entirely onto the individual creator, we have completely privatized the financial ruin. The burnout is the literal fuel that makes the system run until the creator collapses.
Which brings us full circle, right back to the sheer furious vindication in Geeky Sparkles.
She saw all of this coming. She saw the studio jobs drying up. She understood the brutal, sleepless reality of surviving outside that ecosystem.
She warned her community, and she was crucified.
And now, as industry darlings like Matt Burley execute the exact escape plan she drew up years ago, she is forced to watch them receive the parades that were violently denied to her.
The Cassandra complex. The truth does not set you free. It is incentivized to remain.
When we step back from the specific drama, the macroeconomic picture is unforgiving. The traditional animation industry, built on linear ad revenue, syndication, and ZRRP-funded streaming, is fracturing beyond repair.
Creators are being violently forced out of the drafting room and thrust into the boardroom. They must become ruthless entrepreneurs and supply chain managers.
We are witnessing a mandatory return to the 1980s model of merchandise-driven production. The survival of a beautifully animated world now depends entirely on whether its audience will fund Kickstarters and buy physical products.
It's a massive tectonic.
And I want to remind you, the listener, that this deep dive isn't just a story about cartoons. This is a profound lesson in how industries shift beneath our...
Whether you work in tech, print media, or corporate consulting, the underlying mechanics of disruption are the same.
When the old funding models die, your impressive resume won't save you. The people who survive are the ones willing to face reality early, endure the hustle, and build direct relationships with their audience.
And figure out how to sell the merch of your specific trade.
Which leaves us with one final, lingering thought. A question for you to mull over long after this deep dive ends. We started this journey looking at Matt Burley's Rejected Pit, a deeply personal story about a sick kid encountering Thai spirit.
A story meant to help fragile children understand.
Right. If the entire future of independent art now relies completely on what can be monetized through direct crowdfunding and manufactured merchandise, what happens to those brilliant, complex, deeply personal stories that simply don't easily translate into a cute, sellable plush toy?
It's a terrifying thought.
In our desperate rush to save the creators from the collapsing studio system, are we accidentally ensuring that we only ever get art that doubles as a product? Think about it. Have a great day and keep looking for the truth behind the trend.